Welcome back to part 5 of ex12-rockPaperScissors. And what we just did the previous time is we actually used a button, a rock button, and we set a random image to display here. And we set a image rock to display here because we're using the rock button. And we also are displaying the labels, the associated labels with these. So rock goes there and scissors go here. And if you notice, this is showing up bolder and a little bit bigger just because I think it looks nicer than them being the same. And I'll just show you what I did really quick. I already did it, but then you'll have to do this. But I went into my CSS, so I opened up my CSS file and I just added, and I did this with a comma so I could just do two at the same time. I did my title and comp title. And where did I get that from? Well, I made sure I checked and I looked up here to where those labels are. And I use the top ones. It's the first, the one that says human, the one that says computer. It's my title and comp title. Those are the IDs. So I identified the IDs in the CSS. And you don't have to put P before that. You could just put the ID as long as that's the only ID. So my title and comp title with comma. So both of these are getting font family Calibri, Verdania, Arial, and sans serif. And the font weight is bold. And the font size is 1.2. That's like 20% bigger. So it's just a little bit bigger. So those three declarations are kind of added. So I just put these after the other two IDs. So those paragraphs are basically getting that font, that weight, and that size. And it looks a little bit better. So that's all I did in the CSS. And then I could close that up. And I'm good, and it looks a little nicer. So you could always go back to your CSS and make any changes if you need to. If you want to put things in a color and all that, we could do all that. You could keep adding to it, but we're good what we have so far. So back to our JavaScript of what we were doing. The last thing we did is we did a function for the show random RPS, and then we did a function for show rock. And we put the random RPS function inside the rock function so that it actually ran that function when you'd hit a button to show the rock. So two things would happen. So when you would go in here, it would basically show the rock and it would run the random RPS function, which would run a random image there, and the label things too. So that's what that's doing. So the other two are going to be just like that. So these will be easy. This should be an easy one. And what I'll do is I'll just copy this, and we're going to have to add more to this, but I'm going to copy this and I'll put space in between them, and I'll do it again. And this one right away I'll change names because this one's going to be show rock paper. We're going to keep everything in that same order, and this one's going to be scissors. So just check up on your spelling of scissors, show scissors. And what's going to happen in these? They're all going to show a random number when they run, and except this one is going to be 1 and 1, and this one's going to be 2 and 2 because it's going to use that index. How easy was that? So all those buttons should be working right now. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go here and just see if those buttons work, and I'll refresh, and now nothing's working. None of them are working now, so I just did something wrong. Let's go back and see what I did wrong, unless I didn't save it. Everything was working just fine. And RPS array 1. Oh, I got a bracket. I just saw this. I have a bracket missing there for some reason. So I got a square bracket. And, always check first. Visually see if there's something, because maybe there'll be something that shows. And then you could go and use the, the console and check for an error or not. And just, if you're curious, let's just see if that shows up. If we do an inspect. So how do we do that again? We just do control inspect, and we go to the console, and we see if any error showed up. And here they are. They're showing up. And if I click there, it kind of shows the area, and it's showing my RPS Innerhtml, and it's showing right there. Now, I don't know if it said anything about it just said unexpected token. So it just showed that there's some problems there. So, but it highlights the line here, and it right there is where I could see. So, even if I couldn't see that, I could go here and say, oh, I missed the bracket there. So everything else looks okay. So let me just save that, make sure it works, make sure that's the only error I had in there, and I'll close this up, and I'll refresh it, and I'll just see if these work. There goes rock, and there's paper. So I would lose that one. Now let's say I'll choose paper. Doesn't look like anything's happening. Doesn't look like anything's happening. Okay, let's troubleshoot. Why is nothing happening? Okay, if we click a button and nothing happens, let's see. Maybe I didn't put the function on the button. And that's what I did. I go up to my buttons, see that's something, I know that seems simple. It's a troubleshooting thing. Everything the code looked okay. I copied and pasted everything, but it's not working when I hit the button. Well, check the button. Did I miss something on the button? Of course. I didn't put the function names. I didn't put the on-click events on the button. So I have to make sure I do that. And let me just show you one thing. That this is kind of a different way of doing it, and maybe now would be a nice time to show that, just to see something here. If I don't know if I have IDs for these buttons. Let me just look at these. The rock, paper, scissors button. Oh, I do. Here's paper button, and it has an ID called paper button. And let me just show you something here, and we'll just try this out and see what happens here. I'll just try another method of kind of running this, and I'll just do it right after here. And we'd want to organize this all nice, but what I'm going to do is I'll just put a $, and in parentheses I'll put BTN or something. I think it was paper _ BTN. That was the ID name. And I'll put the quotes here. So in that ID, and I'm going to do dot on click, and I'm going to put equals, and I'm going to put show paper. And I'm not going to put a parentheses here. Okay, so let's just see if that works. I'm going to save this, and I'll refresh. And there's my rock. And let's see if paper works. And it works. See, I'm choosing paper. That's why that's not changing. This is the random thing that's changing. So that works. So this is a different way of actually doing an on-click event. It's actually kind of attaching it to an ID. It's just a different way of doing it. And that we're not using an add event listener. And what's nice about this is, if we had a separate JavaScript file, this would be all in the JavaScript file, and we wouldn't need to combine any JavaScript in our HTML. Because right now, this is all HTML and IDs except for when we use the on-click event. And if we did this separate, and we could even do this. If this works, we could do this. We could copy that, and this one I'll call it show rock. And I'll make sure I get the capital R in there. And this one, rock, paper, scissors. And make sure this one is scissors. And I'll make sure that this part is rock button, paper, and scissors button. And I'll double check those names. And I'll make sure I put a comment here so I identify this as, as the button events. So I could go up here and, okay, scissors button, paper button. So I could get rid of this. I could get rid of this whole on-click in here, and that way I wouldn't need any JavaScript inside my button, inside my HTML, because that just makes it more confusing to have to go and look for that. Look how we forgot to do that, because we forgot to go up here, or I forgot to go up into my HTML and change it. But as long as we have an ID, we're using that kind of function definition or a function expression to identify the ID, rock button, paper button, scissors button. We're saying dot on click, and we're running the function. And when you don't actually put parentheses here, when you do it, when you call it in this way, and I'll show you something else. There's even another way to define these too. You could define functions by saying variable show rock and function, so that these things are almost like variables of functions. But this will work like this. So I'm just going to leave it like this now. And now that I have them out of there, but what I will do is I'll just put I'll put 2 slashes here, and I'll just and I could just do that. And that way, whether you put some dashes there or something like that, if it's easier to see, maybe you really want to make it stand out so you could find them, maybe you could even, copy this and put it underneath. That way you're kind of, you got this nice little section here that's kind of divided up, so that those are your events for buttons. And you could do other events like that, because we had a button up here up at the top that did the same thing. You could do the same thing there. The only thing this would need is it would need an ID. So we would have to make sure it's called like ID submit name or something, and that way we could have all our events in here. But we're also going to have a reset button. So for these could be for RPS button, submit button, and eventually our reset button we could put in here too. But let me just throw I guess I'll put that first, because that button comes first, so I might as well put it first in the order. Now I don't have an ID for that yet, but let's just call it, let's just call it submit BTN, since we're kind of giving buttons IDs like that. we'll call it submit button. And that would actually be, I think submit name was the name of that function. I think that was the name of the function, that submit name that we had here. Now the only thing we'd have to do here is way up here under submit name is, I'll just put ID. I'll just use the onClick and put ID and just call it submit button right in here. And that way I could use this text that's here. I'll just btn. So now it has an ID instead of an onClick event. And now all the buttons have IDs except for the reset. But we're not worried about that yet. So the submit button, the rock button, you know, I could just say button onClick events. How about that? And we could always move them around if we need to. That way if you need to find something. So let's see if this works. I'll save it and I'll go here and I'll refresh, and let's see if I'll put my name in here and we'll see if it works right away. There it goes. Rich, that works. Rock, that works. There's rock, and I just lost that match. Rock again, stalemate. Rock again, stalemate. Scissors, I won. Scissors, I won. And I could choose scissors. I would win because I can cut paper. I'll do it again. Now I would lose because rock crushes scissors. I'll do paper. Paper covers rock. I win that one. So that's the way it works. Now we didn't assign any points yet. And one thing we might try here, we might try a reset button, and then we'll deal with all the points and displaying everything that's here. But since reset has to do with basically resetting images first, we'll kind of attack all of our events that handle images. So let's create a reset right here and see if we could reset these images. So, but what we're going to do here, I'll make an event right away because I know I'm going to have one. And let's see, we have a reset already. Button ID equals reset button. And let's do this. Let's do it like that because that's the way the others are. So we'll make sure it's button ID reset button like that. And then down here, this will be reset button. Function will probably be reset. It's probably going to be the function. And what we could do is maybe start to show this to kind of reset the images. So this would be the last one anyway. So let's just, you know, I'll just copy something here. And I'll just call it function reset. What we're going to reset here is going to be my rps.source. And we're also going to do comp rps.source. So we're going to do the one that's up here. That's going to reset. Well, all this stuff is going to reset. So we could copy a bunch of this stuff and stick it in here. So the images are going to reset and the text is going to reset. So this is kind of what's going to reset so far. I'm going to take this out of here because we're not going to run any other function in here for now. But this is kind of what's going to happen. Now we're going to have to get our images together and get them all set up. But what we want to do is when we reset, it's going to be the blank. Now we got to figure out how to put a blank image back in here. And what we have to do for Innerhtml is what we could, let's look at the HTML first, how it first started, where those labels are. So we actually want to take the labels out, and here's comp RPS text, and it had a non-breaking space. And it had a non-breaking space. So let's just put a non-breaking space in there. And we can just do that with quotes. We can just put quotes and put ampersand non-breaking space, NBSP. So that should reset those things so they both will be back to non-breaking spaces again. Oh, there's a semicolon. I almost forgot that. Because I'm thinking, how would it know it's an HTML? Because it's an HTML code, but the ampersand just wouldn't do that, but it needs a semicolon in there. So that's what, if you take a look at that, the non-breaking space, you can see it has a semicolon. So I want to make sure it has a semicolon. So that should read as an HTML in there. So I don't need any tags or anything like that. So that should work okay. This is the issue that we're going to have right now. So we got to have something in there that's actually going to display our image. And we might be able to, let's try the most simplest thing first. Let's just see if we can do this. Because this might be the easiest thing to do. What if we did this? What if we did image, and I think it's called blank. And then I'm just going to copy that because the other one would also be blank. So what if we just did that? If we just did source and we set it to blank, that might work. Now that may not be the most efficient way to do it, but that might work. So let's just save it and see if that works. So we'll see if all this stuff works. Our function is called reset. So let's just save this and see if this works. I'm going to reset, and we're not reset, but I'm going to refresh. And I'll put my name in here, make sure that works again. That works. Do rock again. That works. That's a stalemate. Make sure scissors, I would win. Let's try paper. Stalemate. I would lose. Let's try scissors. Stalemate. I would lose because rock would crush me. Now here's the big thing. We're going to reset. And what should happen when we hit this reset button is it should change these things to non-breaking spaces, and it should just have those blank images again. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work because I didn't even try this yet, but let's see if this works. And it works. Now, it didn't wipe this out, and it didn't wipe our name out. We might want to send our name back to human, and we might want to send this back to blank again, but that's pretty good so far. So we'll deal with some of the other text stuff and some of the other point stuff later, but for now, I think we're pretty good with the images that we're dealing with. So we're going to take a break here. I believe this is part 5, and before we move on to part 6, we can stop here.